Hello, everyone. We're going to start in about 1 minute, so we'll be welcoming Adrian, Shea, and Tomson. Be careful.
I have a bit of an eye problem at the moment, so theoretically I'm half blind at the moment. I mean, this eye works very well; I can see you very well, but it causes imbalance with walking and going upstairs and stuff like that. That's why I'm walking unsteadily. I'm not drunk.
So with that, good evening. My name is Hélène Giroux, and I'm the director of the Wakefield Writers Festival. And it's a delight to, thank you. And it's a very real pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We welcome guests on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. We recognize their strength and their wisdom, their stewardship of the land and of the water, the plants and the animals. And together, we commit to learning about and learning with Indigenous peoples, with respectful thanks, advocacy, and action towards reparation and reconciliation. It's a beautiful evening for us to come together to listen to two powerful, extraordinary storytellers, writers, musicians, multidisciplinary performers, and who will tell us their stories tonight with our host, Adrian Harewood. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you thank you for inviting us.
And we're also really happy to welcome our online audience from across Canada this evening. This is the festival's 9th edition, and our theme this year is Truth in Our Time. With the festival's 5 events, what we hope to do is to show how the literary and the performing arts can contribute in a very meaningful way to action towards some of the really pressing social issues of our time. And tonight, Tomson Highway and Shea Redvers will explore Indigenous culture, pride and gratitude, and how they approach their own authenticity and joy to unite and create community. We wouldn't be able to offer our festival without the support of so many of our funders and our sponsors: la Municipalité de LaPeche, la MRC des Collines de l'Outaouais, the Canada Council for the Arts, Heritage Canada, and the English Language Arts Network and Culture Outaouais. As well, there are many who work with us to make this festival possible. Al Connors, who produces all of the festival's brilliant live stream events. Greg Brown, the world's best sound engineer. Claude Laroche, our lighting technician who can fix any problem. John Schmidt, our digital marketing guru. Elise Marlane, the graphic designer who designed this powerful graphic this year. Francisca Hines, whose wonderful photographs capture the essence of our festival. Thank you. Pam Scobie, our unflappable volunteer coordinator, who organizes all of our exceptional volunteers. The Biblio Wakefield Library, who every year puts together a display of all of our authors' works. The Centre Wakefield LaPeche with Laura Burks, Lindsay Farley, and Jess Harris. And the Lowdown to Holly Newsback. We celebrated their 50th anniversary last night, and we explored the power of community journalism, who each year features our authors, our festival events. And and our bookseller, Jim Sherman of Perfect Books Ottawa, an independent bookshop for the passionate reader. Thank you for being with us again, Jim. And two, as I've said often, extraordinary colleagues, without whom none of this would be possible. Festival co-organizers Chris Corcoran and Peter Gillies. Thank you. And please join me in a big round of applause for our wonderful pianist, Deborah Tomson. So as you can see, it takes a great community to put on a good festival. And, it's now my pleasure to introduce Adrian Harewood, our host. Adrian has really graciously hosted our festival a number of years, and we'd like to offer you the title of Honorary Wakefielder, if you would accept. Thank you. Adrian is Associate Professor of Journalism at Carleton University. He was former host of CBC's Ottawa All in a Day and anchor of CBC Ottawa News at 6. In 2020, Adrian won the Canadian Screen Award for Best Local Anchor and was nominated for a Canadian Screen Award for Best Interviewer in 2017. He's been guest host of national CBC programs, including Current, As It Happens, and Counterspin. Adrian created the Carleton Journalism School's first ever graduated course focused on race, journalism, race, and diversity, and the first course in Canada devoted to the study of the history of Black Canadian journalism. He's interviewed, amongst many others, Angela Davis, Salman Rushdie, Bill Clinton, Bob Woodward, Deepa Mehta, Ken Dryden, Lawrence Hill, Branford Marsalis, and the list goes on. He's a member of the Canadian Association of Journalists and the National Association of Black Journalists, and is board member of Journalists for Human Rights. Adrian, it's a pleasure to welcome you back this evening to our festival. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Hélène, for that lovely introduction. How is everyone? You're okay? You ready for tonight? I am too. It's always a delight to be back here in Wakefield. As some of you might know, I'm from the Big Smoke, Ottawa. So that I know that to many of you in this room, I am a proverbial fat cat, a carpetbagger, an interloper. I know I come from away, but somehow I feel at home here. I can't help it. And I particularly feel at home here in Wakefield during this wonderful festival of yours, the Wakefield Writers Festival. And I say festival of yours because this festival truly feels like it is yours. It feels like it is owned by you, not the organizers, but by the people, by the residents of this dynamic community. When I'm here, I feel as if I'm amongst friends. You know, I've been fortunate to participate in several literary events over the past 20 years, both as a host, organizer, and volunteer. But I can say that there's something special going on here in West Quebec. You've managed to create an institution that has earned the literary world's respect. It's why you're able to attract some of the most important writers and intellectuals of our time to this event. This is a festival that treats writers right, with the regard that they deserve. And so I feel privileged to be associated with it. Tonight, you are in for a treat. And I think it's safe to say that we're creating a little bit of history tonight. Tonight, we are honored to have two writers in our midst who represent the best of us. And when I say the best of us, I mean all of us. Tomson and Shea hail from the north, but reside in the south. They both have backgrounds in social work. And they're also two of the most accomplished multidisciplinary artists of their generations. For nearly 4 decades, Tomson Highway has been at the center of the national conversation. Born in 1951, Tomson Highway is Cree and spent his childhood in northern Manitoba. In the 1980s, does anyone here remember the 80s? This is a young crowd. Do you remember the 80s? Okay. Well, in the 80s, his two plays, The Rez Sisters and Dry Lips Ought to Move to Kapuskasing. Indeed, yes, give it up. looked at the lives of Indigenous people living on a reservation in Northern Ontario. Tomson later wrote a best-selling novel, Kiss of the Fur Queen, and several books for children. His memoir, his astonishing memoir, Permanent Astonishment, won him critical acclaim and was awarded the Hilary Weston Prize for nonfiction. In addition to being one of the most esteemed and celebrated writers in the land, Tomson is also a classically trained concert pianist. He's written musical works in various genres, including jazz and musical theater. He was the librettist of the first Cree language opera, The Journey, or Pimotuin. In 2018, the Montreal Symphony Orchestra opened its 85th season with LaPeche, The Trickster's Quest, a chamber opera with a libretto by Tomson Highway in Cree. Most recently, and for those of you, you seem to be a CBC crowd here. Most recently, Tomson delivered his masterful 2022 Massey lecture entitled Laughing with the Trickster on Sex, Death, and Accordions. And tonight he joins us here, Tomson Highway. Tunshai Redvers is Métis and Dene and grew up in Hay River in the Northwest Territories. They were born in 1995. Tunshai is a published poet, author, and screenwriter whose work appears in a bevy of creative, anthology, and academic publications. They have story edited and written for shows airing on Netflix, Crave, Apple TV Plus, and PBS Kids. In addition to hundreds of talks, workshops, and panels, and Tunshai was telling me in the green room about all the travel that they have done over the last number of years, speaking to audiences just like this one. They are a performance artist and actor with performances and credits spanning Pride Toronto, CBC, Paramount Plus, and more. They're also a member of BIPOC TV and Film's Board of Directors, an organization working to uproot barriers for Black, Indigenous, and people of color across Canada's screen media industry. Tunshai is the author of a collection of poetry called Fireweed and will be publishing their first children's book this year entitled Fluffy and the Stars. And I was very fortunate to get a look at it, a little taste of the book. And I just learned that Tunshai will be receiving a Governor General's Meritorious Award for their work with the youth organization that they and her brother Kelvin started, We Matters. And that's coming up very, very soon. Please welcome Tunshai Redvers. So welcome. It's great to see you. It's great. Tunshai, we're meeting for the first time.
There we go.
Yeah.
The trick to this microphone. I am so excited to be here and incredibly honored to be sandwiched in between these two incredible people, to be sitting next to Tomson Highway. As you said, Adrian, we're of different generations, and so it's very, very cool to be sitting next to the grandfather of Indigenous literature and theater in what is now Canada. So I'm really excited to be here sharing the space with you all.
Well, you are exactly where you're supposed to be, which is at the center. All right. So thank you for joining us. And Tomson, I think the last time we spoke was in a church in Ottawa, and you were playing piano, singing, carrying on. I was just watching, actually.
I remember you were saying Mass.
I was saying Mass.
It was a church, right? Back then he was a priest.
Indeed.
But he got fired.
Yeah. And you were dressed.
But I'll leave that story out.
You're not that this audience, and not that Wakefield doesn't deserve it, but you're dressed to the nines tonight.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, see, I can't see you because so I don't know whether you're looking at me or her.
I'm not. No.
Anyway,
no,
I'm dressed tonight because well, I had to. I couldn't come naked. I wanted to because the weather was so nice, but I was told not to. No, I'm on my way to the after this to the Governor General's Awards, Performing Arts Awards is tonight. Big event at the National Arts Centre, and the reason I was told to be there because I didn't win this year. I can't win every year, but I won last year, and so I came to say thank you to the organization who put the show together and meet the new winners, among whom are people like Katie Lang and Molly Johnson and so on. So dishy people we call them in my culture. Mind you, that's your culture too. Anyway, it's just, well, I live here, and I'm from north, like Tanche, I'm from the very, very far north. I'm subarctic. I almost, basically, on the border between the Arctic and the subarctic. There is no such border, but it's that area. And where the two meet, but now I've lived, I went to university, well, I went to high school in Winnipeg, and eventually in London, Ontario, which is how I became an Easterner. And now I've moved here, and I live in Aylmer. When the grandchildren started arriving, talking about grandparents, they were born here. So, well, not here, Wakefield, but in Aylmer. And so we came here to help raise them. And so we're very, 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 we're wonderful grandparents, just in case you can't tell. I'm a wonderful grandfather. But that's because I have wonderful grandchildren. Oh my God, our universe turns around them.
Well, we're happy that you're part of our universe tonight.
Yeah.
Tomson. I wanted to begin by talking about something that we've been doing for the last couple minutes, and that's laughing. Your recent Massey lecture is called Laughing with the Trickster on sex, death, and accordions. And you've said in a previous interview, I live for laughter. There is no more beautiful sound in the world than human laughter. Why is laughter at the center of much of what you do and how you think?
Well, there's several reasons, several levels of reason, but one of them is the most immediate one is that I find that people are at their most beautiful when they laugh, when their teeth are bared. They look like they're snarling at you, that kind of laughter, and they're at their most beautiful, they're most attractive when they just rayonner. Comment on dit ça en anglais? They glow with beauty when they laugh, and that's the first reason. And the second reason is kind of music. It's very musical. Some people have the most insane laughs. I know at least one person, and a very good friend, who laughs like Satan. He does. He has this really demonic laugh, but he's not demonic. And anyway, I have friends who laugh like loons. I have a friend who laughs like that cartoon dog you see who goes. Every single kind. I think at one point I thought about maybe I'm not going to have time for it. Other people have to do it. Maybe a person here should get to put together a museum of laughter, a museum of laughter. Just everybody records, and you can press a button on the wall and just hear that particular kind of laughter. That kind of. Wouldn't that be great? I know I helped start a language museum. There's a woman who's working on it, to recording all the. Oh well, I don't know how many languages in the world that she wants to include, but there's thousands of them, and she wants to include as many of them. So, anyway, laughter is, and that's the first reason, and then there's others. But the one that really obsesses me is the fact that I grew up Roman Catholic. In fact, I'm a retired priest as well, but I got fired. I'll tell you that story later on, okay? It's the kind of story that you don't tell to polite company. Anyway, I grew up. I'm a retired altar boy, and a very good one at that. And but I was disturbed. I didn't agree with the fact that we were born to suffer. Like I honestly don't believe, at a very profound level of my being, that God put us on this earth to suffer. And only after we've had suffered enough on this planet, Are we perhaps, just perhaps, deserving of happiness in the hereafter? And if the hereafter even exists to begin with? And I violently disagree with that. I think it's made an awful lot of people absolutely miserable. I think it's destroyed a lot of lives. And that's very irresponsible. I think it's abusive. And I'm not very good with abuse. I think I would try my very best to work against abuse, to heal it, to heal it at whatever level, and the best way to do it. And it comes from the mythology of my people. The first creature that God created, and first of all, she was female. She was not male. That's another big question we have in the work that I do. And the first creature that she put on the earth was a clown. And the clown laughed. It's almost like he said, "Let there be laughter." That was his first sentence. And so I believe God put us on this earth for the reason we're here on this earth is to laugh. I believe that with all my being.
Tomson, in fact, Tomson, you say that Cree is the funniest language in the world.
Yes.
You said that the language is cartoon-like, is clown-like.
It's very cartoon-like.
How?
You'd have to speak it. Okay, I just did a little presentation somewhere, I can't even remember where, but where I taught people, English-speaking people and French-speaking people, because it was in Ottawa actually, how to say divorce. Divorce in Cree is a very sad word in English, of course. See what I mean? You start going down as soon as you start speaking English. Really, I mean, English is brilliant, but it lives up here. It's first and foremost an intellectual language, okay? And it's superb one at that. When I want to make money, I speak English. When I want to, but when I want to make money in Cree, I don't make a penny. It works the other way. Okay, so I tell them like, how do you say divorce in Cree? And in Cree, it's funny. You see, it's very syllabic. The syllables dance off the tongue. Even the syllables themselves are funny of themselves without the meaning. But it's in the past tense, first of all. They divorced. So how we say that is which literally translates as they threw each other away. and the implication being into the garbage. Okay? So if you divorce your wife or your husband sometime 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that means you've just thrown them into the garbage. And you walk away from the mess, laughing, because he's in the garbage and you're not. See what I mean? Listen to the laughter in this room. You're laughing about divorce, which is not a very funny concept. Yeah. In English, it isn't, but in Cree, it is. It really is. And I could just go on and on and on about how funny it is. But I did say, I've said that many times over the years. And somebody once attacked me, saying, an intellectual attacked me. How dare they? A German intellectual on top of that, who are the most, as you know, Germans are the most intellectual people in the world, right? Anyway, he said, how do you know Cree is the funniest language in the world? How do you know that apparently about 60, I was told by a Congolese woman that there are about 60 languages in the Congo alone. Belgian, French, quite aside. She said, and I believed her, because in Cree we have many dialects. There's about 45 dialects of Cree in Canada. Yeah. Anyway, all languages are like that. But anyway, he said, how do you know that one of the languages in the Congo is not the funniest language in the world? Have you heard it? And I said, no. But all I can say is that when you speak Cree, the first syllable that comes off your tongue, you're already laughing to beat the band. As soon as you switch to English, the laughter stops automatically. And I can see that for sure.
Yeah. Tansha, I think when Tomson is talking about laughter, like Tomson is often centering joy, right? It's an expression.
Yeah,
he's saying that we need to center joy, and that's something that's very, very close to your heart. That's something that you talk about a lot, and you talk about the importance of Indigenous joy, and the importance of joy, particularly for young people, Indigenous youth. Talk about what joy means to you, Tansha.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think of joy as resistance. That joy is something that a lot of Indigenous people, Indigenous young people, Indigenous communities have frankly been robbed of. I'm an intergenerational residential school survivor, so my mother and my grandmother both spent a significant time in residential school, and they both had very traumatic experiences. And in the context of residential school, as Tomson was sharing, you aren't given the space to express love or joy or to even really know what that means. Laughter is stifled, you have to be quiet, you can't express yourself. And the impacts of this have rippled down into communities. And so when we look at Indigenous communities now, and my area of expertise, which is Indigenous youth mental health, there are so many issues from, I don't want to name them all, but there's a lot of dysfunction and trauma that exist in our communities and in our families that are a direct result of that residential school era. And so I believe that children were robbed of play and joy and laughter. And so I'm of the belief that in reclaiming joy in our lives, it's a direct resistance to this colonial and Western system that told us that we're not deserving of experiencing or feeling love and joy. That's what the greater colonial society has told Indigenous people for so long, that you are not deserving of love and joy and acceptance. And so choosing to laugh loud and love loud and express loudly is in itself decolonial. It's a resistance to those systems that said we can't laugh. So joy is so important. And in the context of Indigenous young people, I believe that we need to be facilitating and creating more spaces for them to come together and just laugh and be.
It's resistance, is it not? But it's also a recognition of complexity, right? It's a recognition of the fullness of Indigenous life. Because you also talk about the fact, and we know that this happens. We know that this happens in our media, where there is a tendency to flatten Indigenous life. And you have talked about the danger of constantly focusing on Indigenous pathology and how debilitating that is. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in the context of Indigenous literature and storytelling, up until this point, and for very good reason, there's been an emphasis on understanding Indigenous history, understanding the context of colonial Canada, understanding, residential schools and the 60s Scoop and the Indian Act and oppressive systems and so many Indigenous stories up to now have really focused on those stories of pain and hurt and trauma, and we see it everywhere, even in the media. And I think that when we only focus on the negative, or when we only focus on the trauma and the hurt, we're kind of stuck. And so I really truly believe that there is a place for stories, there is a place for those stories of understanding what has happened, of understanding trauma and pain. But what I have dedicated myself is creating new narratives of Indigenous joy and love and hope and healing. And I believe that we need stories that center joy, love, healing, and laughter in order to continue to move forward, or even move forward at all. So I think that we are, at least for myself, I'm really only interested in telling stories that center hope and love and joy in some way.
There's a reason why the two of you are sitting beside each other tonight and are on this stage together, because there are a lot of parallels between your stories. Tomson, you've said that, quote, in order for a nation to be healthy, it needs to have a spirit that is happy. Living in the moment is important. You can't live in the past, and I'm paraphrasing here right now. Can't live in the past all the time. You need to live in the moment and in the future.
Where did you hear that?
I'm just doing...
I know. I'll tell you something.
I just did my research.
I know.
I just did my research.
I've been interviewed by this man before in that church, in the confessional. I heard the confession, and boom, there he was at the other side of the screen. So I had to whisper. You know, we used to have this priest back home. He wasn't very good, hard of hearing a bit, and he would ask you to repeat the sin. So I think he enjoyed hearing the sin. But and the rest of us would be sitting sort of close to the confessional with our ears straightened like this, right? Because every once in a while we'd hear him say, which means, how many times? And the other person would say, with great pleasure, which means many times. You wonder what he was doing behind that little black curtain, eh? Anyway, the reason I mention that is because I do believe myself personally. I mean, I'm old, okay? Let's face it. I've been around the block a few times, and I've been around the world a few times, and quite incredible life that I've had so far. But I believe that with all this talk about residential schools in the media and all that, to tell you the truth, I am sick of it. I cannot read another word of it. I've had enough. I spent 9 years in one of those schools, and I had a perfectly wonderful time. A lot of those stories are just not true. If you believe that we had nails pounded through our tongues because we spoke Cree, I can show you the hole in my tongue if you want, and you can hear me talk. Do I sound like a hole in my tongue? You know, it's just not true. That story cannot be true. No torture technique by any totalitarian government in the whole world has ever used that particular kind of torture technique on its victims.
But is it not, Tomson,
Yeah.
is it not possible that people experience the world differently?
Yeah.
And people have different kinds.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but people have different kinds of experiences. So it is possible, for example, as a black person living in this society, right, that you might have been profiled by the police. Right?
Profiled by what?
Profiled, or you might have been brutalized, right? Or you might have been attacked by the police. That's possible. But it's also possible that you might not have been.
Yep.
Right? So it is possible that there are people who experience, not just possible, people did, right? People did experience residential schools as terror and trauma. You, though, in your particular specific experience, right, you experienced a residential school where, as someone coming from Shea on the Manitoba border, you were exposed to music. You were put in an environment where you were able to realize your potential as a human being. But that's your particular experience.
Well, it was a choice. It was an individual choice. I believe from the bottom of my heart that happiness is an act of the will. You choose it. You choose your own heaven. You make your own heaven on this planet, and you make your own earth. Your own earth, yes, and also your own hell.
But sometimes the earth,
Your own heaven. Your own heaven.
But sometimes the earth, and this is a truism. Sometimes the earth is made hellish for you. Sometimes, in spite of the fact that individuals have agency as individuals, right? But it's also possible sometimes that we are moved by other forces, right, that are sometimes crushing us.
But the thing is, that happens everywhere, not just Native communities.
Sure.
Divorce exists in the non-Native community, like in spades. Violence exists in the non-Native community in spades. Look at the statistics of rape, okay? Rape, sexual abuse is not, we don't have a monopoly on child sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse happens everywhere. To everybody. I myself have made a personal choice over the course of the 71 years that I've been here that I've come to the conclusion, among many other conclusions I've come to, is that if you dwell, the surefire recipe to misery is to live in the past. Contrary-wise, the surefire recipe the surefire recipe to misery is and unhappiness is to live in the past. The surefire recipe, par contre, is to live in the present and the future. That's my surefire recipe for success
And yet-
happiness.
and yet,
I
Tomson-
chose it, and that's why I am successful and I am happy.
Yeah,
and I don't have time for the other stuff. I really don't.
And I'm saying the truth is we're all a bundle of contradictions. Like one thing I know about you,
Yeah.
right?
You know everything, don't you?
But one thing I know about you is that one of your favorite books, one of the kind of formative books for you, and it's a book that you return to from time to time, is A Diary of Anne Frank. Right? That's a book.
No, I only read it once.
Okay.
But
it resonates. It resonates.
But I've read an awful lot of Holocaust literature.
Why?
Because I thought it was absolutely fascinating. It was riveting.
But why?
Because people, and that happened in Haiti recently too. I was there just after the last big tremblement de terre. The people who had been devastated by trauma, destroyed by, in the case of, well, let's not name specific countries. We don't want to go there. In the millions, okay? Yet they came back. The human spirit came back and triumphed every time. The Haitians are the most happy, the happiest people I've ever met in my life. They really are. Their music is spectacular.
But I would imagine, though, that it's important to reflect on what happened in the Holocaust. Like, you recognize that moment in human history, it's important for us to learn something from that.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, it is. But it's also important for you to learn that like I have people, I live right here in Ottawa, and get know who talk about,
This is a Wakefield crowd. Sorry, we're not in Ottawa. Sorry, folks.
Yeah.
We're in Wakefield.
Okay. Well, I'm from Ottawa too now. Anyway, you made native resident school experience made you a dysfunctional parent, made for dysfunctional marriages. Well, I look around me, and everywhere I look, there's dysfunctional marriages, and there's an awful lot of people out there, non-native, who don't know how to be parents. I've seen dreadful parenting all around me, and yet they will say, "Oh, you suffered, we didn't." That's what is that? I don't know what you call it. My English is not very good. But we're not the only ones who suffered. Human suffering is everywhere.
Tansha, you've been listening very patiently for the last couple of minutes.
I have thoughts.
You have thoughts. I want you to share those thoughts. I want you to intervene and tell us what you think about what you've just been hearing.
Yeah, I think that, I'm of a similar belief that we can't always live in the past. But I truly believe that we need to fully understand the past. And the theme of this year's event is truth, right? And so I think we need to understand the truth of the past in order to understand our present and make decisions on where we want to go for the future. Yeah, thanks. I think in my case, I have directly felt the impacts of I'm an intergenerational residential school survivor, so I have directly felt the impacts of that specific trauma. And Tomson is right in that trauma and dysfunction exists in every culture and in so many different families. And I think the important nuance here is that, yes, dysfunction exists everywhere. No matter you're white, black, indigenous, dysfunction exists. And I think the nuance there is that there are systemic forces at play that have created contexts and environments and experiences where marginalized folks have been marginalized. There are larger systems at play. So yes, dysfunction exists everywhere, but there are certain systems and processes that have intentionally been created in order to create harm to communities, and we see this all over the place. And so I think we need to recognize those systems at play in creating spaces of dysfunction. And I think that most of the time, dysfunction and hurt and trauma and pain comes from not talking about what we've been through. And so I do a lot of talking with Indigenous young people and communities and also non-Indigenous communities and people all over. And one thing that I use to kind of describe this process of colonization is that it created this norm of don't talk, don't trust, don't tell. And I think when we don't talk about things, we're not creating space to heal individually or collectively. And I think that what a lot of these systems did, it created environments where people are afraid to talk about their family experiences, their own personal individual experiences. And I believe that we need to openly talk about all of these things.
Your work, your body of work, so human, right? There's something very human about both of you. And I think part of it is due to the social work that the two of you both of you have been engaged in. I know that for you, Tomson, at the age of 23, you had a little bit of a crisis, right? Because you were this classically trained pianist, and you were wondering, you know, as an artist, what is my role? What should I be doing? And you stopped playing, basically, as a classically trained pianist. And for a number of years, you worked directly in the community because you felt it was incumbent upon you to work and to kind of free other people. To free other people. As Toni Morrison would say, you know, when you have a little bit of power and when you're in a position of power, your job is to try to free other people. That's what you did, right? And so the question I have for both of you is, like, what is the role of the artist? What do you regard as being your role? Because clearly, at that point when you were 23, Tomson, you were questioning the utility, the value of what you were doing, and you stopped doing it. So what do you regard at this point, you know, in your career, at this point in your career, as the role of the writer, the role of the artist, the role of the Indigenous writer, the role of the Indigenous artist?
Well, I mean, I did work. I did 7 years of social work, from age 23 to age 30, and I did not touch a piano for 7 years. I don't know, it just happened that way. Anyway, but I was elbow deep doing the dirty work. I worked with broken families, children of broken families, broken marriages. I worked with a lot of inmates in prisons. I worked in the prison system, and I worked and then I started slowly slid into the arts because of I had a younger brother who was a dancer, and he was experimenting with dance, and so I joined him in his work, and ever since then I've had the perspective as an artist of I think of myself as an artist with a social conscience. I know exactly what I know. I like to think that I know exactly what I'm doing when I write a book or write a play or write a piece of music. But so I've come over to the conclusion. The other difference between me and my young colleague here is that the age makes a huge difference. I've been around, like I say, I'm 71 years old, and my time here on this planet is limited. Okay, I look in the mirror this morning and I said, "Oh my God, I'm lucky if I have 9 more years." Okay, which takes me to age 80, and that means I have only 9 more years left to laugh and to have one hell of a good time. And that's what I decided to do. I have one hell of a good time. I just spent 6 weeks in Brazil on the beaches, frolicking about on the beaches of Brazil. How many Canadians get to do that for 6 weeks? And I go almost every year to Brazil. It's one of my favorite countries in the world, politics aside. It's the spirit of the people that I like. I'm crazy about samba and bossa nova as a musician, and so on and so forth. But I've just decided that I don't have any more time for tears. I just have time for laughter. My time is limited, and that's what I intend to do. And I've been through the mill. Okay, I've been hurt. If you haven't been hurt, if you never feel depressed, never feel lonely or any of that stuff, that means you're not human. In order to be human, you have to have those experiences, and everybody has them to one degree or another. Some more so than others, of course. But it was a conscious choice on my part, and this also comes from extraordinary parents. I had parents that were absolutely extraordinary. 60 years of love.
Pelagie and Joe.
Pelagie and Joe, yeah. And I was lucky in that sense. They gave me the positive spirit that I have today, and the joyful spirit. They laughed a lot, It was a laughing marriage. Anyway, that gives me a lot of strength. And so whenever I'm in trouble, I have certain problems I'm dealing with right now, for instance, but I don't let them get me down. I talk to them every day. I have a way of praying. That is praying like this, as opposed to praying on other people. Anyway, I do that too. Anyway, but I try to make sure the people I pray at are smaller than me. In any case, and so they guide me. I consider them my spirit guides. They both died about 20 years ago, in their 80s. And my younger brother, who was a dancer, who died at age 35 of AIDS, 30 years ago. He would have been 65 this year. Lovely, lovely, absolutely extraordinary people whom I love with all my heart, and they talk to me every day. So I use them as my spirit guides, and they guide me through life. And whenever I come across a problem, I say, "What would Joe Harvey do with this instance?" You know, and he comes to me. The answer comes to me, and that's what I use to guide my life with and make the right decisions, choosing the right people, avoiding the dangerous people, avoiding dangerous situations. And harmful things, and being like I meet unpleasant people like everybody else, but I don't abuse them. I don't use the F word with them. That's against my religion. They guide me through a beautiful life, a beautiful, extraordinary life that I have today, and that's what I focus on, just to spread the beauty of my life. I think that the role of an artist, the number one role of an artist, is to spread joy. That's what I do. That's my specialty.
I want to come to Tanchai in a second, but I wanted to deepen the question because you noted that for 7 years you didn't play the piano at all.
No.
So what I'm curious about is what brought you back to art, when you came back to art, what kind of artist did you want to be?
I had no idea. My brother was a dancer, and the unfortunate thing about dance is that it's the hardest of all the arts to choose, because it's murder on the body. You suffer a lot physically, and you get very, very bad pay, and it's poverty. Beautiful, but it's a beautiful life too at the same time. And by the time you reach 30, you start to think of retirement, certainly by the age of 40. So retired dancers, what choices do they have? Some of them become real estate agents. Some of them become film producers, TV producers. Some of them become the law. There's quite a number of people who turn to law, and the lucky ones teach other ballet students, dance students. I keep thinking. Anyway, for a free imagination, it's a trick-stretching to hear that noise. Anyway, excuse me. Excuse me. Anyway, and then the other lucky few become choreographers, the talented ones, eh? And so my brother started experimenting with choreography, and the first thing a choreographer needs in dance is music. And I was never trained as a composer, but I do have the chops. I studied fugue, I studied counterpoint, I studied harmony, all that stuff. And I started writing music when I was 30. I didn't know I could write it, but I did, and it worked. And the first piece worked, the second worked, and it just kept growing and growing until they started developing into plays. And so I started writing plays accidentally. I became accidentally a playwright and a writer, really by accident. I never really wanted to be a writer. I still want to be a pianist, and I still am, but that's what brought me back. And I love it.
Can you play something for us right now?
That piano is not great. I heard in the background. First of all,
the pianist is great.
I will. Okay, the piano. First of all, the piano is not great. Piano players are notoriously fussy about what they play. They won't play anything, just any old thing. And also, it's sitting backwards. We also care deeply about the position we have to the audience. Like I have to face this side has to be seen. This is my beautiful.
So after the break, we're gonna move the piano.
Only if you okay. I'll play it. Only if you do you sing.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Do you sing?
Hold very tight, please, ting ting. Hold very tight, please, ting ting. When you are lost in London and you don't know where you are, you hear my voice calling. Pass further down the car, and very soon you'll find yourself inside the terminus. In a London Transport diesel engine, 97 horsepower omnibus.
Oh my! Well, of course. Yeah. The first thing you notice about you is that you have a beautiful voice. Most people who work on the radio, I talk to a lot of radios, in my time. I mean, radio people, not radio. I talk to radios too, but only when they're turned off. Anyway, but the reason I think I get the impression that most people get hired chose radio careers because of the voices. You have to have a beautiful voice to be a radio personality. I don't have a beautiful voice.
I disagree. It's what you say. It's about your mind.
But you have a voice. You have a rich, creamy voice. Don't you think he has a creamy voice? Yeah. Okay. I'll put you to work later on.
Shea, let me ask you though about the role of the artist and the role of the writer. Like what you said here. I write to create new narratives. So what is your particular role as a writer? What do you see it being?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reflecting on this the other day just because I have my hands in so many different areas. I'm a performance artist, a screen actor. I write children's books, novels, TV. Like I'm all over the place, and so I'm kind of in this place right now of thinking about what I want my artist journey to be. And so what came to me the other day is vulnerability. I think for myself, the role of the artist is to be vulnerable. And I think that in being vulnerable, whether it be through music or dance or writing, you are creating a space for other people to be vulnerable. You are creating a space for others to be seen and heard. So for me, it is to be vulnerable, and that is incredibly scary. I don't know about you folks, but anytime I share a written work with somebody, like I'm terrified, because that's that's everything that I have out onto the page that I'm putting out into the world. And so for me, I think it is to be vulnerable. And along with creating new narratives for myself, I grew up in a world where I didn't see myself represented. And I loved media, I loved literature, I loved watching television and reading books and reading magazines, and I never saw myself represented.
Myself as a
young Indigenous queer person, and if I did, it was those stories rooted in pain and hurt and trauma. And as a young person, when all you see are stories of pain and hurt and trauma, you think that's the only reality that exists for you. You think that's the only possibility that there is for you. And so now I'm all about creating new narratives. I want to write television shows that I don't currently see exist. Children's books that I don't currently see exist.
You're publishing one this year?
Yes, this
Fluffy.
year, Fluffy and the Stars. And so for me, it's creating the stories that I grew up not seeing and that I still don't see. And so, in the vein of Indigenous literature, I think Indigenous literature is everything. If you're an Indigenous writer, whatever you write, whether it's campy horror or comedy or romance or sci-fi, it is Indigenous literature. And so I think we're kind of entering this new era of Indigenous futurism, of really thinking about the stories that young people want to be a part of creating. And for me, that's what it is. It's creating what I don't currently see.
I know that you're a former hockey player. We talked about that earlier, and basketball player. But I wanted to say this. If the two of you were athletes, right, as writer, you would be decathletes, right? And the reason I use the term decathletes to describe the kind of writer you are is that you write in many different disciplines, both of you, many different genres. Tomson, you have written a novel, you have written memoir, you have written plays. Shea, you have written poetry, a book of poetry. You are writing children's stories. You are writing all kinds of nonfiction. I'm curious, do you approach the writing, or maybe the question is this: do you approach your writing for those different genres in the same way, right? Or do you have to write differently in order to achieve what you need to achieve in those genres? Is there something specific about writing a play, Tomson, as opposed to writing a memoir or writing a novel? Do you approach it the writing differently?
Absolutely, totally. The thing about writing is that you're limited in Canadian theatre anyway. You're limited to 3 characters because that's all you can afford to pay. Whereas in a memoir and novel, you can have thousands. I can have 10,000 caribou on stage, theoretically, you know. I don't have those kinds of limitations in other forms of writing. Canadian theatre is very limiting in that sense, you know. It really is, and especially for a native writer because the distances we have to travel to get to here. Where I come from, which is the extreme north of Manitoba, almost in the Arctic, I was basically conceived in Northwest Territories and born in Manitoba. That's how close it was. And I wish I had the pictures to prove it. But I don't. We didn't even have cameras back then. We didn't have television. I grew up without television. I grew up without electricity. So to hire an actor like Michel Tremblay, whom I adore, in Montreal, can cast a 15-person show with 15 actors from the immediate neighborhood in Montreal. In order for me to cast 2 native actors, if I want a 2-character play, I have to send for them from northern Manitoba who speak the dialect of Cree that I speak. And do you know how much a plane ticket for? I go home. I used to go home twice a year, pre-pandemic times. A plane ticket from where I live here in Gatineau to up there, the Manitoba. I don't even come from a town. I come from the forest. I was born in the virgin forest, and. It costs twice as much to go. That's why I go to Rio all the time, because it costs me twice as much to go to Brochet as it does to Rio. For me, it's like it's pennies, because I grew up with that expense all my life. But to hire actors from there is prohibitive. To pay those kinds of prices for transportation, when my adorable Michel Tremblay, they can just walk to work for nothing. My actors have to pay them $1,700 plane tickets and put them up in expensive hotel rooms in Toronto for a month. Whereas the actors, Michel Tremblay's actors, have their own apartments right there in Montreal. Those are those kinds of economic considerations. So, and they're brutal. Like, it gets to the point where I despair of ever writing another play because I can't afford to. I simply can't afford to. And my time is running out. But I just want to go back to one point about the role of the artist. I believe that the role of an artist, is the role of, there's physical health, and then there's spiritual health, and psychological health, and emotional health. Anyway, artists are like doctors. It's just that the difference is, and the health and the cultural industries are every bit as important to society as are the medical industries. The difference is that doctors work with diseases after they've been born, when it's too late. Artists work with diseases before they're born, because a lot of diseases come from emotional and psychological disorder. And we snip the disease in the bud before it becomes too dangerous. That's what we do. That's where we're important, for society. And the reason why, thank you very much. The reason why French society became what it is after the Revolution, which was one of the bloodiest events on the face of the earth, was because you have people like Zola and Balzac and the intellectuals of that era and eras following. They healed that spirit, Charles Dickens dealt with the Industrial Revolution, which was a brutal, brutal experience. And talking about it in the press, he was part of the healing process for British people of that era, in the late 19th century. Anyway, that's where we're here. That's the kind of work we do.
Tansha, in terms of how you approach writing a television screenplay or teleplay, does it differ from how you approach writing a poetry?
Absolutely. I think they all serve a different purpose, both for myself personally and for the audiences that I'm writing for. And a big part of my writing is, I want to write for myself. And I want to write for the younger version of myself. And so a lot of it is very personal. So, even when I went home recently and I was going through boxes of poetry that I had written back in middle school and high school for English class. And I loved English. I loved writing short stories. And so I was going through all this old poetry and oh, wow, my teacher didn't flag this. Probably should have had a conversation with me, because for me, poetry was a coping mechanism. It was a way to express the things that I couldn't verbally express. I did that through the pen on the page. So something like poetry, and through my collection of poems, Fireweed, it's my own personal journey. Poetry for me is a personal outlet. It's a personal a processing of my experiences, if you will.
It's cathartic.
It's cathartic, yeah. Versus writing a rom-com screenplay, which frankly is just a hell of a lot of fun. To make people fall in love and to write jokes, and that is different than I don't know, a gritty hour adult drama, which is different than a preschool series that I write for. And so,
or writing for a burlesque show, as you have.
Yes, yes. And so yeah, I approach each story differently. Yes.
You said, Tanshai, that growing up in Hay River in the Northwest Territories, being queer wasn't something that you imagined you could be. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, growing up in the isolated north, I think I grew up more subarctic than Tomson here. I was just a little bit north of him, but growing up in the subarctic, in the isolated north, queer people weren't visibly, like, the word queer, the word gay wasn't even something that crossed my mind. It was something that I heard. It wasn't even something that existed. And so it wasn't even something that I thought I could be, because I just didn't even know that was a possibility until later. And then I look back and I go, wow. Yeah, I was 6 years old and my girl Barbies were, living in a house together. So it was there. The opportunity wasn't there for me to understand who I was, and it was only through leaving my small isolated community and coming to the South that I began to see people of different experiences and backgrounds and identities, and I was like, wow, this world is so much bigger than I thought it was. There are so many more possibilities for me than what I even thought.
Tomson, for you, can you describe the journey of coming out? Did you have to come out?
I knew who I was since I was 3. I knew who I was since I was 3. I was a gifted child. I learned things really, really quickly. I don't want to sound like I'm blowing my own horn, because I don't play the horn. I play the piano. But I put my averages pushed 95 degrees. Is that it? 95% all the way through school, and I worked hard. I worked very, very hard, and not because I wanted to be the first. I just enjoy working hard. I've always enjoyed it, because my father taught me how to do that. My father was a fisherman in the summertime when we were home from school, and. I started working when I was 3, when we had no running water. So we'd go down the hill with our little pails, my brother and I, when we were 5, 6, and 4. Go down the hills with our little, on laundry day, and go up and down the hill all morning long to go and put water in the tub so that my mother could boil it and then wash all our clothes. So 12 children she had. Imagine doing that kind of laundry with your hands here today. So we managed to help with that, and that was really, really good for us. And anyway, I just worked hard. And so my father loved us. They loved us so much that nothing. My first experience with that gender identity thing was, with a big question, was my younger brother, who was also gay. The other 10 were let's say, I like to put it this way. My younger brother and I were two-spirit. All the other 10 kids in my family were only one spirit. We had 2 spirits, they had 1. That's one of the great privileges of being two-spirit. You can see the world from both sides. You have 350-degree vision. It's magic. That's why most two-spirit people are artists and magicians. They're there for a purpose, to add a third gender to the straight line of heterosexual identity. So a gender that is sorely, sorely needed. To turn that straight line, that phallic structure, into a circle. So our job, first of all, is to either, before it's too late, before we come to the end of the world, which is coming pretty fast with these forest fires, next summer, before those forest fires will come raging down from the Gatineau Hills and burn every stick of furniture in Ottawa. There's that very possibility. I grew up in Paradise in northern Manitoba. Forests, thousands, millions of lakes up there. When you fly over that area, it looks like a mangrove swamp. There is more water than land. But now, I grew up in Paradise, born in Paradise, grew up in Paradise, but now it's no longer possible. That whole area is being burnt to the ground. The animals, fish are dying because of the poisoned waters, and so on and so forth. And you see that happening more and more all over the world. This is happening right now in northern Alberta and the Northwest Territories. And so we have to take care of the earth, and the only way to take, and the big question I have for this particular artist has for the system as it is, there is a victimizing system in place. That system is monotheism, a system of only one God, and that God is male, and he's heterosexual male on top of that. Okay? What happens to the people who aren't? We've been put in a disadvantageous position. We've been put into the position of victims. And our right now is to fight back, take the male God off his throne, because he needs female company. He hasn't had it for like 10,000 years. He doesn't know how to have a good time. I've never heard him laugh. I read that book, the Book of Truth, as they call it, in at least 2 languages, from cover to cover, several times. And I've never heard him laugh. I've never heard him have a girlfriend, or a wife, or even a mistress. So I have no idea what he does for sex, which is perhaps why he has to have sex with, guess who? Our little boys. Now there's a big question, okay? Very important question that hasn't been dealt with yet. And if anybody's going to ask that question, it's the artists. Anyway, we need, before those forest fires, the male God, with his supreme power, destroys the planet. And at this point in time, our children are really questioning themselves as to whether they will have children for them to inherit the planet as we leave it. The big question is, when you say, Our Father who art in heaven, the central prayer in the canon, the great question is, if that's where he is, which is fine and dandy, then where is our mother? We want to know. We want her back before it's too late. And so people who are both genders at the same time, and the linguistic structure of the Cree language works accordingly. There is no gender in Cree. We are all he, she's, and as is God. So we have to bring that principle back. If you read the history books, you will discover gradually that the idea of divinity in female form disappeared off the planet, at least the Western world, gradually over the course of 4,000 years, and got replaced by a totally male system. And now that God is reaching a final, like the end of the straight line, as I say, because circles have no end. We have to put the goddess back in her place. We have to give our mother back her rightful place in the universe, her place of respect and dignity. And that's our job.
Tunshaw, you look like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, just to build off of what Tomson was saying, and there's something that he said around that, being Two-Spirit it's magic. We are, artists, and I talk about this a lot at pre-colonization, indigenous nations across the globe, it doesn't matter where you are, had recognized gender identities beyond male and female. Like, this isn't a new concept. This is something that has existed in indigenous nations across the world since time immemorial. And in Dene culture, we believe that everything has a spirit. Everything has a spirit, from the trees to the water to the plant life to the flowers to the animals to the humans. We all carry spirit. We are all interconnected, and we have a responsibility to care for each other, because without one of us, we're stronger together. And so, Tomson was talking about the circle. I talk about, two-spirit and queer and non-binary identities as welcoming folks home, welcoming folks back into the circle, because for so long we have been pushed out of the circle to the peripheries. We're not welcome in the circle. And until that circle is whole, it's not strong. And so, recognizing that we all have a spirit and a responsibility to each other, and we have a responsibility to welcome everybody to be a part of the circle. Because until we do, there are going to be cracks and openings, and so I welcome folks back into the circle.
Just to go back to my father, my extraordinary father, just for a second. He saw us playing little girly games, my brother and I, when we were 2 and 4, 6 years old. Most fathers would beat the shit out of their little boys and beat the woman into him for that, and traumatize them for life, and many of them did. Our father, who was the most macho man who ever lived, he was so handsome, much more handsome than me, I must say. He was world championship dog sled racer. He was the Gilles Villeneuve of his day. He really was a hero. And he never passed judgment on us for 1 second. He loved us just as much. He gave us the permission to be two spirits before we knew such a concept existed. We were loved to the ends of the earth, and we still are. And that's how I feel. It's a privilege to be two-spirit. I mean, and if you don't believe me, go to Europe or any other country. Well, forget China, forget Russia. But in Europe, just on one level alone, the best clubs, the best bars are the funnest because they're two-spirit. They're spectacular.
Yeah. Tomson, Tanshai was talking about the circle. You've been at the center of the circle in this country for almost 4 or 5 decades. There are not a lot of artists, there are not a lot of writers who were at the center of the circle in the 1980s who are part of the conversation today. You just delivered the 2022 Massey Lecture. You are still saying new things. You're still pushing forward. And I'm curious as to what keeps you going. There are a lot of reasons to be depressed. There are a lot of reasons to want to become detached in many ways from this world of ours. So what keeps you, and what has kept you so engaged and as creative as you continue to be?
Okay, I'm fortunate on so many levels, and another one is having extraordinary parents was the first stroke of luck in my life. The second stroke of luck was the fact that I was born in 1951 at the beginning of the 50s boom, the baby boom. Overall now we're entering our 70s, which is where you're watching all these senior citizens home growing up everywhere across the country. Get ready, folks. We're on our way. And the funnest, I'll tell you right now, the funnest retirement homes will be the two-spirit ones. Come on over. Come on over to the party, And we're also very funny, laughter-loving people. Anyway, I was born at the perfect time in history, Canadian history. The last half of the 20th century was the most peaceful period in our history. There've been no wars on Canadian soil. Well, maybe skirmishes, but nothing like what they've experienced in Europe and other parts in Asia. Oh my God! And out of that emerged the first generation of Native people who were in their teens and childhood. I'm part of the first generation of Native people to get university degrees, to be very, very well educated. My father had grade 0. He never got a chance to go to school. His name was Joe. He had a hard time writing his first name. He scrawled it out with a stubby little pencil tip. Joe. OE, and we had to correct him sometimes. And that was it. That was the extent of his literacy. And in order to avoid that situation for his children, he put me on a bush plane when I was 6, and handed me to the pilot as a really pretty little boy of 6, and I was very pretty back then. My brother, I have to tell you the truth, he was one of the most beautiful men who ever lived. He really was stunning. Anyway, put us on the plane, and he lifted me up into the air, and he put me into the pilot's arms and said, "Yes, my son, go to that school. Go down there." You know, basically he said, which means, I wonder what the hell he's going to go with down there. But it was rhetorical. What I read between the lines, and I'm a very good reader between the lines, is, you go down there, my boy, you go down there and kick shit. And I have. And he's very proud of me to this very day. Yeah. And that's why I have so much to say. I'm a learned man. I've done my ABCs. I speak several languages. I play the music of Rachmaninoff and Shostakovich and all the rest, Chopin and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Final question before we take a break. Tanshai, when you think about the future, or rather, I'd like you to write the future for us.
I'm trying.
What is that future? When you imagine the future that you want, you know, young people, maybe our great-great-grandchildren, what does that future look like? What's the future that you would like to write?
Oof, so much. I think ultimately want to write a future where everybody, doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or how you identify, that they have voice, that they're given space, that they're given the freedom to be able to explore who they want to be. And I think growing up, I felt stifled. I felt like I didn't have the freedom or permission or opportunity to just explore who I wanted to be and how I wanted to identify in the world, how I wanted to walk through the world. And so I wish for a future where everyone feels the freedom to be their authentic self. And that's ultimately what it is, where everybody can feel safe in being their authentic self. I hope for a future where, you know, we collectively care about each other, where we want each other to do well and succeed, where we are, you know, to bring it back to Dene values and Dene principles. I mean, they're universal. It's respect, it's humility, it's wisdom, it's love. And I think I just want a future where we're all able to embody that. And also where, you know, young people can just have fun. Like, I think for Indigenous young folks in this country, so much of our young adulthood and our adolescence and our adulthood is spent fighting, is spent advocating, it's spent being the only one in the room, having to constantly just fight for your voice to be heard and advocate and push doors open. And I just want a future where that door is propped open. Like, the doors are just open, whether you want to be an architect or an astronaut or a writer or a composer, like, that's just possible for you. And yeah, so opportunity, love, acceptance, freedom to express, and really just collective care.
Well, you know, I think I can speak. I think I can speak on behalf of the audience in thanking the two of you for embodying respect and humility and love tonight in our conversation.
I just want to add one footnote about my extraordinary father. He really was extraordinary. He put me on that plane with immense pride on a pontoon. And it was a bush plane. It was the only way to get to school. The nearest school was 600 kilometers away. When he could barely spell out the 3 letters of his first name, Joe. I have grade 18. because he put me on that plane out of his own will. He wanted me to go to that school and get the best grades possible, and I did. And here I am with you, the beautiful white people, moony ass, I call them in my book, this region. And one of the reasons why my life is so successful is because I'm surrounded by people like you. That's you as an EW, by the way, as in female sheep. Trick ya.
Thank you.
I feel the need to shout out my father. Peter, if you're watching on the live stream, you're also amazing.
On that note, thank you both for an extraordinary conversation. Tête-à-Tête, Redvers, Tomson Highway, thank you.
Adrian Harewood, the extraordinary Adrian Harewood, the beautiful voice.
We're going to take a short break. I think we have about 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back. And if you'd like to pose a question or you have a comment, there'll be an opportunity for that. So, is that right? Do we have 10 minutes or more than that? 15 minutes? 15 minutes. Okay. So we'll be back here in 15 minutes. Thanks so much.
Don't leave. Thank you.
But a new one is coming out.
Yeah.
That will be the story. Or on the internet.
Testing. Oh, okay. This one's working.
It's like a cartoon. Okay. And it's musical.
So welcome back. How are you doing? Enjoying yourself, we hope. First of all, just a big thank you to all the volunteers. If you are a volunteer, can you just stand up and be recognized for all the work that you've done tonight? Thank you. We appreciate. Thank you. We appreciate your work. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? There's some more people. Oh, more volunteers. Okay, indeed. There are more volunteers out there. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. We really do appreciate it. The way things are going to work in the second half is each of our writers will read for a couple of minutes. I think Tomson is going to serenade us, I believe, as well. And then we're going to ask you to pose questions. If you have any comments that you'd like to make, we'd love you to come to the microphone. Actually, no, we're going to have a microphone in the audience. So I think we're going to begin with Tête-à-Tête. And you had something to read? Yes. Okay.
Sure
you can set it up.
Yes. So I have my first children's picture book coming out in August. So it's not out yet, but this will be the first time that I'm reading and promoting this book. So there is a QR code over at the book table where you can scan the QR code and it'll take you to a page where you can pre-order copies of Fluffy and the Stars. And so I guess a bit of context for how this book came to be is I did my Master of Indigenous Social Work, and I have a background in Indigenous youth mental health and community development. And so in one of my counseling courses in grad school, I met a friend by the name of Rosa. And from grad school, we both went on to pursue full-time careers in mental health. And then, as so many do, we burnt out. And then we both shifted to becoming full-time freelance creatives and artists. And then we just collaborated on a picture book together. So we went from grad school to mental health careers to burnout to pursuing artist careers to writing a children's book about grief, naturally. And so this book is about a non-binary child by the name of Shea, who develops a very, very close relationship with their childhood dog, Fluffy, and goes through the process of grief, of losing that friend. And so I won't read the whole book, but I have a portion of the book that I will read, and then I also have a few selected poems that I'll read for you.
And the illustrations are fantastic.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah. It's beautifully illustrated, and Rosa, as an artist, has such a specific, distinct style, and yeah. So here we go. So Fluffy and the Stars. And I'm kind of starting in the middle and ending before the end, but I'm sorry you can't see the photos either. I'm I do a children's book thing where I go like this. I don't have the hard copy yet in hand, so it's a printout. Even as they grew older, nighttime was scary for Shea because they were afraid of the dark. Fluffy had her own pillow next to Shea's and helped them feel safe. Fluffy didn't like thunderstorms because of the loud noises, but Shea knew exactly how to comfort her. With a lullaby and belly rubs, Fluffy never got tired of belly rubs. When Shea went to school, Fluffy waited patiently for them to return. And when Shea came home, Fluffy always greeted them with a toy and lots of excitement. For years, Shea and Fluffy made each other very happy. Shea hoped they would be together forever. But as Fluffy got older, she wasn't able to run as fast as she used to or jump without Shea's help. One day, after a visit to the veterinary clinic, Mom told Shea that Fluffy was sick. Shea would need to say goodbye to Fluffy. Shea was very upset. It wasn't fair that Fluffy was sick. They wanted to take Fluffy far away from home so they could stay together. Shea began to collect their things to run away. But as they packed, Fluffy sniffed her way over to the backpack and sat on top of it. She put a paw on Shea's hand, and they looked each other in the eyes. Shea felt that Fluffy was trying to tell them something. Shea realized how special their bond was. No matter what happened to Fluffy, Shea would always be able to remember the amazing times they had together. Instead of saying goodbye, Shea thanked Fluffy for all the goofy fun, warm cuddles, and treasured memories. In return, Fluffy said, "Woof," and gave Shea a sloppy kiss on the cheek. The first morning when Shea woke up and Fluffy wasn't there, they felt heartbroken. Mom reminded Shea that when you miss someone, it means you hold love for them in your heart, and that love stays with you forever. As Shea and Mom gathered Fluffy's belongings, Shea decided to keep Fluffy's favorite toy. Whenever Shea felt sad about missing their best friend, they gave the toy a squeeze and recalled a funny memory to lift their spirits, like the time Fluffy ate all the cheese off Mom's slice of pizza. Then one night, during a thunderstorm, Shea had a dream that Fluffy was floating with the stars. The stars were friends with Fluffy and sang her comforting lullabies. There were even planets that gave Fluffy endless belly rubs. Fluffy had other friends with her too, like Biscuit, Dixie, Scout, and Prince. They slept in comfy cloud beds, played fetch with asteroids, and had the entire galaxy to play hide and seek in. Most important, they all had each other. Thank you. So that's just an excerpt from Fluffy and the Stars. I had a dog at 7 years old. I got a dog, and I had that dog for 18 and a half years. We grew up together, and I'm such an animal lover. And when that dog passed away, it was heartbreaking. And in understanding that grief, I had a 9-year-old niece. And at the time, in her 8-9-year-old brain, she was trying to understand this concept of grief and animals that she knew that she was close to passing away. And one of the things that she said when she was trying to understand, where Angel passed away, she said, Angel and Tigger, there are 2 dogs that passed away. She said, Angel and Tigger are floating with the stars, and they're getting endless belly rubs from all the planets. And that was my niece's understanding of what happened. And so I thought, wow, I have to write a children's book about Fluffy floating in the stars. I also have a few selected poems that I'll read for you. These are from Fireweed, which is my 2019 collection of poetry. It's going out of print with Kegadons. So there's one copy left of Fireweed over at the table that you're welcome to fight over. So after this, please, whoever gets that last copy, I hope you enjoy it. Okay. Unlike Tomson here, I'm not a language speaker. Through the process of colonization, I lost access to Dene Suhlene, my language, and it's not something that I grew up with, and it's something that I craved, and that I wish I had access to. I ask you probably 7 times how to say, "This tea is good" in Chippewan. While you fold flour I can't even eat thanks to genes on Dad's side, into bannock dough. And I repeat it 7 more times to myself, even though I know I'll still forget it after the 7th. I am the 7th generation. And so there is a hole in my memory where language slips through and disappears as soon as words fall from my mouth. After 7 times 7 generations, I settle with nushi, potato, because it's a word my colonial-formed mouth can handle, and I fill that hole with handfuls of Saskatoon berries we picked earlier that day. Tasting words I can't pronounce is better when they're sweet, even if it only fills me up just for right now. I walk on the land, the earth my ancestors cultivated with their spirit. Their stories interwoven into the threads of root and grass that whisper beneath my toes. I listen and hear their laughter, hardened by resilience, but softened by the hope that their generations of children will walk as I walk and breathe strength in unburdened will to continue to speak the stories that tickle their feet. This one is an ode to the North. Your skin is birch syrup on my lips, sweeter than spring breeze and warmer than late sun, calmer than lake after breakup and louder than morning robin, more healing than cedar tea boiled over fire, more intoxicating than trout-scented smoke clouds. My love, you are North. Let me come home to you. Red rose tea around late uncle's table. Aunties laugh over broken Dene Suhlene, teaching me mispronunciations. My vagina is nice instead of weather. Eating dry meat, fresh picked strawberries, mom's bannock, homemade mooseberry jam. There's nothing more healing than warm tan hands at my side. I could read poetry to you all day. I love it. But I just picked out those 4 pieces for you today because I need to hand it over to Tomson here. But am I allowed to plug some stuff coming up? Yeah. So Fluffy's coming out this year. I also wrote as my first episode of television that I wrote. It's called Jane, and it can be found on Apple TV+. And it's a really important and significant story. So Jane is a kids live action series that's inspired by the work of Jane Goodall. I grew up reading Jane Goodall's books. consider myself an environmentalist. And so Apple TV created this show inspired by Jane Goodall's work, where a young Jane and her chimpanzee Greybeard and her best friend David go on fantasy adventures around the world to learn about endangered animals and learn ways that they can help care for the planet. And each episode features a different endangered animal. And so the caribou is an animal that's significant to both Tomson and I's culture. We actually both have written about the caribou. And the caribou the numbers are dwindling. And so I was able to bring a Dene story, a Dene legend, about the caribou and the significance to Dene communities to this Kids Apple TV Plus series. And so I highly recommend, if you have nieces, nephews, nibblings, kids, I highly recommend checking out Jane. It's episode 9, Ranger for Tyrannus. I've also written for Sullivan's Crossing. It's out now on CBC. And I have a few episodes also featuring 3 Indigenous figures significant across North America for a preschool series called Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museum. So that will be coming out next year as well. And then I have a number of other things that I'm currently got my fingers on that I can't talk about yet. But thank you. Thank you for listening to my words.
Thank you, Shea. Thank you. Tomson, I think it's your turn. I think it's your turn.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for your wonderful reading. And thank you so much for being here, everybody. Anyway, I'm having vision problems, so I might not read. I might sing instead. No, just joking. As they used to say about Enrico Caruso, the legendary Italian opera singer, he had a voice that was heard only once a century. I, on the other hand, have a voice that should be heard only once a century. I can write pretty music, I can play pretty music and all that sort of stuff, but I cannot sing. I can carry a tune, but I don't have a voice. Dreadful voice. Last time I sang in public, three people ended up in the hospital. I had to go into brain surgery. They had to have a brain transplant. Anyway, so I'm going to play it by ear here. I had an extraordinary childhood. The part of the board of the residential school experience that's never talked about is that we had 2 months off every summer, and 2 of the most beautiful months of the year in the Arctic, which is July and August, when the bugs are gone. The bugs come out in May and June. But when you go up there, and hopefully you will someday, even though it's impossible to get up there unless you have lots of money, unless you have the budget of Donald Trump. August especially is the most extraordinary month of the year. It's beautiful. For some reason, the wind dies down, and the lakes are smooth as glass. And that corner of Manitoba, where I come from, has 10,000 lakes. Well, the lake that Shea, my village, is situated on is at the northern tip of a lake called Reindeer Lake, which is shaped like an ice cream cone, and it straddles the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border. And so we lived in both provinces, like we were bi-provincial. And so, yes, we were bi, from the word go. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, actually, because we used to play islands everywhere. Like Reindeer Lake, which is 150 miles. So I'm thinking miles now. I still think of it miles. 150 miles long by 40 miles wide. So it's huge. And they say it has 5,000 islands, just that one lake alone.
23rd largest.
Yeah, something like that, yeah, in the lake. Oh my goodness, you know everything. You're like God, you know everything. This man has godly ambitions, have you noticed? Anyway, okay, so and the water is clear, crystal clear, clean. It's so clean that you can see in parts you can see the bottom of the lake, very, very far away, and the fishing is extraordinary. The pike is so big that they're the size of certain people that you know. And it's so And so, but they're huge. They look like little whales. They look like, anyway, the fishing is extraordinary. Europeans go all the way up there to go fishing for their summer holidays, so as do Americans from the south, Georgia and Texas and Chicago, Minneapolis. They all come up there to go, well, not in great droves, because they're very expensive, those holidays. But and so we had all these adventures on the border where little boys, we'd play tag, and we'd count in Manitoba and go and hide in Saskatchewan. And vice versa. Stuff like that. We used to love playing all those games. And, but because we were so Catholic, there was such a Catholic community. You know, the Christians had a race to northern Manitoba. And northern Saskatchewan, because my father's actually from Saskatchewan, my mother's from Manitoba. And they had a race to go up there to convert the Indians to Christianity. Well, some of them were slower than others. And the Catholics got there first, which is how I became a Catholic. We were all baptized, all that sort of stuff, and was fiercely Catholic. I grew up in a community that was so Catholic that dogs knew how to bark the first two lines of the Hail Mary. and cats used to go to confession on Saturday nights so they could go to Holy Communion on Sunday morning. And my mother used to rattle her rosaries at Protestants. So she'd make them sound like a rattlesnake, right? And that's how Catholic we were. Anyway, so one of our favorite scenes happened every summer when we lived on Reindeer Lake, because we were so spoiled, because we lived not only on a different island in Reindeer Lake from summer to summer, but we also lived at selected lakes north of Brochet, 30, 40, 50, 60 kilometers north of Brochet, up towards where I was born, in the Virgin Forest. And legend has it that I was born to a virgin too, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so the priest, but because it was a fishing culture, all the people from Brochet used to go out into the islands of Reindeer Lake, or lived on a different lake way up north, like my father did. We were the only ones who could afford to do that. It was just such a privileged life. The other kids couldn't. And so we go camping out on the islands when we were living on Reindeer Lake, on a different island every summer, as I say, and the priest, so the priest would worry about the fact that he had all his congregation was gone. He was singing hymns and praying the Dominus Vobiscum in an empty church. And it drove him crazy. So you know what he did? He bought himself a speedboat, which is a boat with a roof. It looks like a sports car, like one of those fancy, sexy sports cars. And he got himself an outfit, raincoat and all that sort of stuff. And one of those hats that you see Newfoundland fishermen wear. I can't remember. I don't know what those hats are called. He wore that, and with a crucifix on it, because that's how Catholic he was. And he would pile his equipment, his liturgical equipment, into the boat. And then he would go. And then once he was ready, he'd go out into the lake and tour the islands, saying mass on different islands. And people would hear about such a mass, and they'd drive over to the island and they'd say mass on the island in the tent. They would open up the tent if it was a nice day, and we would say the mass in there. And we were just little boys, and so sometimes we weren't even allowed to get up because it was too early. He would get there really early sometimes, and so my mother at Sundays were just special days for us because it was a day off. We didn't work that day. Dad worked 6 days a week, and so there would be no warning. All of a sudden, we'd be doing our Sunday morning stuff, which is really relaxed. My father is shaving. He shaved once a week because Indian people don't have hair, and shaving once a week. And he used my sister, who was 17 at the time, makeup mirror, a little makeup mirror, the round ones, that, and used that as to shave in the woods among the singing birds and all that. We lived in nature. And then my brother Daniel, who was the older brother, would be carving a little boat for us down by the lake, and Renee my little brother, would be playing, chasing the squirrels around, and so on and so forth. And my sister Florence, my other one, was a country singer, so she played the guitar and sing Kitty Wells songs. Like her favorite was three ways to love you, and I'll sing it for you. Just make sure that you're holding your purses in front of you. Okay. The last time, it was terrible. You know how Katie Lang, when she sings, they say she can bring a lump to your throat with the beauty of her voice? Well, you know what happens when I sing? I bring a lunch to people's throats. Which is why you're highly advisable that you hold your purses in front of you. when you hear me sing, but I'll sing for you this one time. Exception. Okay, so my sister would be sitting there with a guitar and singing Kitty Wells, 3 Ways It's Love You. So we used to love Kitty Wells. And there's a reason why we love country music so much, because we only had one transistor radio in Brochet. And that people would come over to people's houses to come and listen to that. And it only worked late at night. It was hanging way up in a tree. The higher it hung, the better the reception. And wouldn't you know that the most powerful radio tower in North America, they say, came from Nashville, Tennessee, which is where and country music floated up to northern Manitoba and flowed down from the trees like blood, you know? And so the little transistor, the higher up in the tree you hung it, the better reception. So, and then later at night it got, the louder it became. So we'd cluster around that tree, sitting on rocks and whatnot by the campfire, and sing along. And my sister's favorite song was, I used to love the words, because we didn't speak English at the time either, so these words were meaningless. But it was like, you'll hear my voice, there are 3 ways, 3 ways. 3 ways to love you, it's true. Anyway, we had terrible voices like that. The other people sounded just like me. And my sister was strumming along, and then all of us, this beautiful Sunday morning, sunshine, the whole thing, the lake smooth as glass. And all of a sudden, around the next island would come the priest in his speedboat. And with his little church, and he'd come really fast because the motor was really fast. He had a 20 horsepower motor. The native people only had 10 horsepower, and we only had canoes, sawed-off canoes, where we stuck attached the motor to the back, and so he'd come roaring up to the island, and everybody would go into a panic because we weren't ready. We had to. My mother would say, clean up your toys, Florence, dust the furniture, blah, 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 this and that. And grab your beads, and away we go. And so that by this time, the priest everybody would be rushing around getting ready, changing clothes, putting on a clean shirt, that kind of stuff. And the priest would be coming up the hill with his suitcase and his sacramental wine inside the suitcase, and his ciborium, and his, what do you call that instrument? That you lift, and there's the hoses inside, and you lift it, and everybody's bows. They had all this fancy equipment. Most of it, what? A chalice is for to hold the host. Anyway, all this, and there's all silver too. And he put on his fancy costumes, silk robes, and all that. And he come up there. And my sister Louise, who was a very pretty girl, she was not vain. She was just proud of her body. She was beautiful. She had the body of Brigitte Bardot with clothes on. Anyway, and we had the girls had no curlers in those days. We had nothing. We had no batteries. There was only one battery for that transistor radio. So when it died, you were in trouble. The closest store was like 5 hours away by motorboat. So they'd have to, you know what the girls used to do with that battery? They'd boil it. They'd put it in a pot of water over the campfire and boil the battery. And just sit there and wait. And half an hour later, lo and behold, the battery would come back to life. So now you know, boiling it, when you run out of batteries, you just boil the battery for half an hour and it'll come back to life. Try it. But I would advise, however, that you stop at cell phones, okay? Don't boil your cell phone when it runs out of power. Anyway, so that was about it. And they had no curlers. So the teenage girls, would take, we had carnation milk in cans. And so they'd take an empty carnation milk can, and it's got paper wrapping, the red and white with the carnation, and throw it in the campfire. We always do campfires all summer long. And the campfire would burn out the paper covering, and then the heat of the metal. And then the girls, once it was hot enough, the girls had a way of popping it, popping both sides open with a screwdriver or whatever. And then you cut one side of it, and then roll it out, turn it out flat, so it was a flat piece of metal, tin, and that you could cut with the scissors. And so that was the next step, once it was cold enough. And cut the can, the tin with the scissors, and then take so they end up as little strips of metal. And then they would wrap that tin, those little strips of tin, with shopping bag paper. Wrap it like that, and then they would wet their hair and put their hair they turned those things into curlers, those metal strips covered with paper, and tied their hair into little loops there, so that by the time they were finished, they were covered with these strips, and they looked absolutely awful. They looked like monkeys. Anyway, so Louise was doing this with her hair, right? And the next morning, you sleep with it that night. And the next morning, you take the curlers out. The hair is dry. We had no dryers, no electricity. And so the next morning, take off those curlers, throw them back in the fire, and brush their hair. And poof, they were Marilyn Monroe. Okay, so this is what my sister was planning, was to look like Marilyn Monroe that night. I don't know why. I think her boyfriend was coming over from the next island. But she had her hair in these curlers. And all of a sudden, Father Darbo was coming up the hill. And everybody's running around getting ready, and she has to rip up. Normally you take them up very carefully, right? But not her. She just ripped them off and threw them into the fire, brushed her hair, all very quick. And then the priest, by that time the priest had arrived, and the mass started. And then we'd said everything in Latin back in those days. Dominus vobiscum. Who knows the answer? Oh, we have one Catholic in the room. Thank God we'll go to heaven when we die.
Tomson,
anyway.
this is better than a reading.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Better.
I thought to myself, because it's...
And you know what I'm
I know the
realizing?
stories by heart. I wrote it. Yeah.
CBC needs to give you a weekly show.
Yeah. Anyway.
When you can play music
thank you
as well.
So much. Anyway,
I think so.
That's so kind of you.
I think
anyway, Dominus Vobiscum means... of course, those of you know your Latin, like good little boys and girls, like we were. It means the Lord be with you. Dominus means Lord in Latin. That's where the word dominate comes from. Dominatrix comes from that word as well. For instance, let's have a show of hands here. For anybody here who has ever been spanked by a dominatrix, please raise your hand. And if so, please tell us what it feels like. They say it hurts. I've never been spanked by a dominatrix myself, but they say it hurts. That's what you say when you get spanked by a dominatrix. Anyway, so we'd be singing Latin, and they sounded like me when they sang it. They sounded like a bunch of cows moving. There'd be about 30 people in that congregation, and the priest would arrive, set up his altar. My mother would put up 2 sawhorses and put a piece of plywood on top and cover it with a white sheet, and that would be the altar. And Father would put on his ciborium and all these fancy instruments with fancy Latin names, all that stuff, and the body of Christ, of course, came in there, and the blood of Jesus Christ is in a phial on the altar. And then he would start saying his mass. Only one time, he came way too early, and Father Darbo, and they were so early that Renee was 4 and I was 6, and we were still asleep, and my mother didn't have the heart to wake us up on a Sunday morning. Sunday mornings are sacred. So all of a sudden, we woke up, my brother and I, these 2 little boys, and heard the singing. And all the other people. My favorite one was, Per omnia saecula saecula saecularum, which means forever and ever and ever, amen. And all of a sudden, my brother and I was woken up by this, Father Darbo had a dreadful voice. Anyway, if I ever meet a Catholic priest with a good voice, I think I'll die. There's not a single one out there. Imagine a priest with a voice like Luciano Pavarotti, eh? Or Elvis Presley.
Tomson, I don't have the heart to stop you.
Yeah.
Let me finish.
Okay. Just let me finish.
Okay.
And then so we woke up, and my brother had to pee, and he had to go through the audience. There was a congregation saying their prayers in Latin. My mother flew into a panic, rushed back to behind the curtain. There was a curtain set up with an empty tin can of tomatoes, and made my brother pee, this little 4-year-old boy pee in it. And as the people are going to communion, from tongue to tongue to tongue to tongue, the little tinkle of the urine in the tongue is going tinkle, 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 tinkle. The body of Christ, amen. Tinkle, 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 the body of Christ, amen. Tinkle, tinkle. And those are the kinds of visitors we had up in the summer times. It was fabulous. Thank you.
You know, you really took the piss out of that. But anyway, I digress. No, piano. Can you play something for us?
You know what? Okay, you're gonna sing?
No.
I can't sing either.
No,
Don't
no,
ask me.
Well, I can.
They don't want to hear me sing. They do want to hear you play.
I'm going to a formal event after this. I'm going to go drinking with the Governor General after this. That's why I have my medal here, because in order to come near the Governor General, you have to wear one of your awards. And the only reason I grabbed this is because this is the only tuxedo shirt I have. I dress like this once a year, once every 10 years. And I noticed there was a wine stain on here, so I decided to wear this to hide it. It's just to hide the wine stain. Anyway, I engaged my partners and my professional partners and I engaged in a very unique form of musical theater called Cree Cabaret. And it's cabaret style music that is sung in the Cree language. And it's a way of, that's my way of helping preserve the Cree language. So I'll play excerpts from one or two songs. But I won't sing. I know, I have trouble with this step there. Oh, dear.
Is that okay?
Yeah. I'll show you an example of a song. I'm not going to sing, but it's from a show, a play, a musical play. And it teaches, they're like teaching songs in a way, except they're very sexy. I wrote a sexy song for you guys because I think you're really sexy. In fact, I've met many sexy people in my time, but you are the sexiest people I've ever met. You're so sexy that I can feel the heat coming from all the way over there to you, and caressing my face like a sweet perfume. Oh, it's not very good. So I show people how to say certain things in Cree. Okay, the first word, this song is called Gisagitan, means I love you. Isn't that pretty? It's my song. It's the title of my song. And that was Gisagitan in Cree means Gisagitan, I love you. The world's most important word in any language. And the words go, take me to a woman is singing to a man in bed. Take me to the place where sunny days just never cease to come your way. And ocean breezes gently blow, or so I've heard men say. They say California is a dream, that we're living high and all that jazz just come to you so naturally, as though they always was. And then she goes, we'll take ourselves a little stroll upon the beach, upon a sandy bloom, and there I will lie you down by my side, and I will tell you, I'll whisper into your ear, Gisagitan means I love you. And it's a very sexy song. So get ready. This is not a very good piano, but I'll close my ears. I'm sure I'm insulting the owner of the piano, but hey. Kazaki. So now you know how to say I love you. Now I have to go back up the stairs. This is going to be very hard.
Thanks so much, Tomson. That was fantastic. Thank you. It was wonderful. At this point, you okay? At this point, okay. At this point, I'd like to invite any of you who have questions or if you have any comments. I think there's going to be a microphone. Maybe I can walk with it. Actually, I can go into. Yeah, I can do that. Is this working? Testing, testing. Okay. Is there someone who would like to? Sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, it's no problem. Maybe you can say your name.
Hi, my name is Reed, and I'd like to thank you both for coming here and sharing your voices with us. This is great to hear your voices and to have your work, to have your voices through your work as well. But I think my question is for both of you. You've both spoken so eloquently about the land and where you come from, and I really pray to God people around Hay River are okay with what's going on up there. The whole world is on fire, it seems. But you speak so eloquently about it and how you both started there and have a clear connection. But I'm just wondering, now that you've moved south into an urban environment, if that relationship with the land and that connection has just changed in any way, or has it evolved, or yeah, just your feelings for the land, for that land, and just Turtle Island, yeah. I just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think and Tomson was actually talking about this in the green room earlier about how in order to pursue certain opportunities, especially when it comes to the creative arts, be it writing or TV and film or music or dance, you kind of have to go to the urban centers. You have to go to the cities, and unfortunately, that means that in order to have certain opportunities, you have to leave the north. And so, for me, my connection to the land is so strong. And for me, it's also a source of healing and understanding myself. I see a lot of myself in the land around me. And for me, remaining grounded in my creative practice is so important. And I do that through my connection to my ancestral territory, to my homeland. So no matter where I am, if I'm in the city of Toronto, which is where I'm based, or overseas, there's a part of me that's always connected to that homeland. And through writing, writing is an incredible way for me to maintain connection to that homeland. I also do meditative practices where I actually visualize the environment of the north around me, and so for me, I hold that connection to the land and specifically the north wherever I am, and in moments where I'm feeling ungrounded or frazzled or all over the place, I connect back to that homeland where I'm rooted. So yeah, you're right. So for those of you who don't know, forest fires are raging across my hometown. Hay River was just evacuated for forest fires, and 16 folks on the Hay River Reserve lost their homes. It burned down. And across Treaty 8 and Northern Alberta, fires are raging. So it's devastating. And a lot of my writing and stories are also from a place of anger and injustice of this land that has done so much for us is Mother Earth is experiencing so much harm right now, and it's devastating. And it's through writing and through art that I'm able to express my frustration and anger with how we're caretaking for the environment. But that connection is so strong. So thank you for pointing to that. Yeah.
Tomson?
Pre-pandemic times, I used to go home twice a year. Once in August, which is a season of no flies, no bugs. The best time to come to northern Manitoba. Avoid May, you'll get eaten alive. And January. when not Christmas because there's too many people, too many relatives. I mean, I love my relatives. It's just, I just get tired of sleeping on the floor in the living room, you know, because that's the only place you can sleep. There's room for you, and also But the winter in January is you've never seen snow so white as you see it in the north. Such purity of whiteness doesn't exist anywhere on the planet. So to see the lakes in the summertime, that crystal clear blue water, and all those wonderful creatures that live down there, and the birds, the loons, and the ducks, and the geese, and the ptarmigans, and all the land animals, the muskrats, and the beaver, and the lynx, you know, and the bears, and so on and so forth. Oh man, it's the richness in the wildlife is beyond belief, and also the plant life, the berries, all the wild berries that we used to pick ourselves and eat, and make pies and God knows what else. It was such incredibly rich, and you don't eat like that. The meat we grew up with was without toxins, without antibiotics, without any of that stuff. It wasn't Kentucky Fried Chicken, you know. It was pure chicken, and anyway, we just ate well, and so I go to see that up north in both seasons, and for that, and then I also go up to see my family and speak Cree, which I speak perfectly. I write in it, I write books in it, I write songs in it, as you just heard, and I love, and we laugh, and we laugh, and we laugh. I go up there to laugh and to replenish my supply of laughter. So it's heaven. And then, of course, the summertime as well is we're up close to the land of the midnight sun. So the sun sets at 11:30 at night at the height of the summer equinox, and it rises at about 11:30 in the morning. No, it sets at about 11:30 at night and rises at about 1:30 in the morning. So it's a very short night, and it never really gets dark completely. There's always a pink glow around the horizon, which sheds a beautiful, unearthly pink light on the entire planet, and that's our perspective. To see the North at its most beautiful, and we really are the guardians of the North. Northern people are, including the Inuit and the Dene, and because we see what's happening up there now to that paradise. It's disappearing. It really is. It's no longer safe for me to go up there. It's no longer safe for me to go and live up there, to go camping. I love island hopping, but you can't do that anymore. And it's getting worse and worse every year. And also, so it means that we have something collectively as people, as a race, as a species, to do something about it in our own way. Yeah.
I think
it's urgent.
Tomson, I think Reed also had asked if your distance from the North has in any way over the years maybe changed your relationship with the land.
No. Yes. When I become better educated over the years, better than most of the people up there, but I make sure that I don't speak English. I refuse to speak English or French, for that matter, up there. I speak Cree all the time, and when I speak on the telephone from down here too, as well. And being in the city, I did change it. Ultimately, I like to think I was happy. I had a great time in Toronto. Toronto made my career. And it was a stunning experience as well. Everything was positive. My whole life has been positive. But I didn't want to stay. That's why I came here, to be with grandchildren, who are absolutely adorable, A, and B, in a sense, I live in a neighborhood of Aylmer that is called Witchwood, which is a pocket of Aylmer that is special beyond belief. And it's like there at night when I go for a walk along the shore, I can feel the wind from the north because it comes all the way from Ungava Bay, from the Arctic. And you can feel that. And that's the contact I have with the north as I know it. It's just, it's almost a sacred feeling. You pray. I go down there every day to sit by the lake and just pray to the water. I just listen to that water. And it's heaven. It's prayer. And the neighborhood, the trees, the flowers. It's just meditation. Just looking at a leaf shuddering in the sun, in the morning sun, to me is praying.
We have
I
another.
do that.
Thank you. We have another question here.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, your voice is smooth like butter, for sure. Tansha, I really liked what you said about being vulnerable in your art and sharing. And I was wondering if there was a particular poem in your collection that maybe you felt most vulnerable writing or sharing with us, or that resonates most deep with you?
A poem that resonates most for me and was the most challenging to write in terms of its vulnerability. Yeah, thank you. I wonder if I have my book here. Let's see if I have some earmarked pages. See if I can find it. One of my favorite poems of mine that I have written is about being two-spirit. It's about grappling with identity and not being accepted in community, in family. And so in that, there is so much vulnerability, and there's still so many queer and trans and two-spirit young people across communities who are unable to be their authentic selves. And so this is a poem about that. So I'll answer in the form of a poem. 1. You told me that I needed to be Indigenous before queer. You told me to contact you when Dene was first in my life, and that you were sick of this queer business. 2. I held my heart in my right hand and my spirit in my left. To me, they sang the same song, their energy one tendril holding my body close to itself. How could I value one over the other when both give me life? 3. I was never taught Dene Sultane, so I spoke colonially. I was taught binaries, stigma, so I acted hetero colonially. 4. For every word I learned that my lips only dreamed of touching, a piece of trauma uproots. For every body I learned that my lips only dreamed of exploring, a piece of shame uproots. 5. I worked hard to reclaim self. I flew home to a time before you where I am free from tainted soil. 6. I am Dene, always. I am queer, always. I am colonial resistance. I am whole love. I am Indigenous magic. I am two-spirit. Thank you. I've struggled with acceptance in both my own family and my communities. And it's a vulnerable place to be. And in addition to writing about my journey of queerness and identity, I speak to experiences of abusive relationships and mental health. I do a lot of mental health advocacy. I have a history of suicidal ideation. And so I talk about all of that through my writing. And so it's hard to be vulnerable. It's scary, but ultimately, I believe that in putting myself out there, others can see themselves represented, and that's what's important to me. And I have the ability to put my voice out there in attempts of it reaching others, and so that's why I choose to be so vulnerable about my experiences. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Tinja, you seem to be on the hot seat. We've been talking a bit about the Roman Catholic Church. Thank you very much, Vatican, for visiting Wakefield tonight. But what about our unofficial Canadian religion, hockey? Was it mentioned you played hockey? What's your position?
I did grow up playing hockey, yes.
And you played what position?
I was a forward, but center was my position. I was
a center, okay.
Yeah, I was a
Always
hustler.
good.
I was the one getting to the puck.
Networker. Yeah, there you go. And the other thing, one of Fluffy's friends, was it named Scout? Is that a shout out to Harper Lee or?
No, that's
you just like Scout.
It wasn't, but
okay. And just a quick one, Tomson, Witchwood, we lived over near the Connaught racetrack for a while. Has pickleball invaded your neighborhood and taken over the tennis court in Witchwood? The neighborhood, Witchwood, great tennis court there. Has it been taken over by the pickleballers?
The pickleballers, I think.
Oh, dude.
It's a very, which one?
Sir, your microphone, Tomson. Tomson, your microphone.
Isolated in it. Oh, It's a pocket of, Richard is a pocket, a very special pocket of Aylmer. It's very small, self-contained. You live there too?
We were just on Lakeview.
Which street?
Lakeview.
Oh, you're kidding. Yeah, our grandchildren live in Lakeview, on Oval, Promenade Oval. Yeah, that's where they live, yeah. They just got old enough to bicycle over to where we are. Yeah. Oh, it's just we just love it. I think that I finally found the place, and I've lived quite a number of places in my time, but I finally found a place where now that I've reached 71, and I'm very happy about it, where I'd like to die. I'd like to die in Aylmer. I'm very happy, just float away on my couch, my love seat in the solarium, watching the morning sunlight, with the leaves shuddering in the sunlight. I could die there. That's where I want to. I don't want to go anywhere else. Yeah. No, we don't have one. We're not sporty people.
Okay.
I play the piano, not hockey. And I'm scared of sports, to tell you the truth. Musicians are scared of sports. You know what? You fall off your bicycle or your skateboard or anything, it's career change. Forget about playing the piano ever again, professionally. You know, it's very dangerous.
We have another question.
Well, people have been known to write with that hands, like that. You know, my left foot. You know that painter. But piano playing takes a very special. It's a very active skill.
Yeah.
It takes an enormous amount of practice and technique. This piano is not. It's very well. If I had a good piano, like I have a 6-foot Yamaha in my living room. If I played that, you'd be very happy.
I think we have another question. Please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nathalie. I've been in this community since 1999. And Tanche, I see your passion. Thank you.
Since 1909?
She's 1909, no, 1999.
Oh.
Yes. And at the time, Tomson, I was 26 with 2 children from northern Manitoba. They're the grandchildren of Elijah.
Dicky?
Elijah Harper. Yes, a friend of yours. But that's okay.
What's his name?
Elijah Harper?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I knew him. I didn't know him very well, but yeah.
Yes.
He was a funny man.
He was a funny man, and he taught me how to say Gedagin.
Yeah.
But, you know, what I want to say is, first to Tanche, is that your passion I recognize, because when I move in this community, I wanted to make a difference, to put culture, indigenous culture, Inuit, Métis, in a place that is away from the museums, away from what we pay at the entrance to witness, and then we go home. Well, all the people at home don't even have a place to sell their art. So I recognize me and my younger self in you, and I thank you for bringing all that passion. It reignited everything within me. And I want to also thank you, Tomson, for coming here with your book that Zoe gave me. This one here, Caribou Song, is illustrated by John Rombo.
Yeah.
John Rombo came to live in the village here for a good month to make some artwork on our balcony.
Oh my goodness.
I have an indigenous store in the village for 22 years. And so at James Sisti's place, he was living, and he was part of this village to draw and create art. And then every little stories that come around are meaningful, and I want to thank the Writers Festival to invite you and to see your joy here, and your joy, Tanche. It's very inspiring for the youth, and I want to thank our ancestors for making us strong. I'm Indigenous as well, from Mi'kmaq Indigenous roots, and French from France.
Yeah.
Et je parle en français.
D'accord, oui, on peut dire avec ton bel accent. Mais quand même, je voulais dire que Elijah Harper vient de l'autre côté de la province.
Oui.
Il vient de l'autre côté, toi à côté de la frontière de l'Ontario. So he's from the Ontario side, I'm from the Saskatchewan, so it's really, really far away. Manitoba is a huge province, and there's a vast difference in the landscape.
Absolutely.
The east towards Ontario is flat, largely flat, and there's also a lot of lakes. But the difference is, by the time you get to the west and to the corner of Welsh territories, you start seeing the eskers. Eskers are very special land formations. They're like 250, some of them are 250 kilometers long, and they're about 50 feet high, so, about approximately, and they just snake their way up north. And the trees only go up to a certain height, the pine trees, and the top is all at a sandy surface. It's all sand, golden sand. So they look like golf courses floating in the sky, and they're so special and such a unique northern feature. Yeah, eskers are extraordinary. Yeah, we have eskers. Ontario side doesn't.
Merci show, Natalie. That's so beautiful. I've been trying to get my hands on. I've been dreaming of a John Rombo piece of art for years now. So if you have any, and at your place, I'll have to come check it out. Incredible Dene artist. Love him.
Where's he from?
More questions?
John Rombo's Lutzelke. Thank you. Lutzelke. It's in the NWT.
Yeah.
Is there another question?
Which is another enormous place.
Question?
Did you know that Nunavut, just Nunavut, which is half what used to be the Northwest Territories, is the same size as all of Western Europe, all of it, from the Russian border all the way to Portugal. Yeah, and yet, the other beautiful thing about the far north is that there's so few people. We have all these enormous land ourselves. So Nunavut has a population of 37,000, whereas all of Western Europe has a population of close to 500 million. So that's the difference. And when you tell people in Europe, I've lived in Europe many, many years. I went hiking in the Pyrenees the other day. That's how I live. I just jump all over the place. And I met these guys from Holland, and I said, yes, Canada has 1 million lakes. And they couldn't believe it. They have a country that's the size of one Canadian lake. Yeah.
Any other questions? And a follow-up question? Okay, sure.
So sorry, while we got tangled in the conversation, I had a question for both of you. What would you say for the youth of today, as Indigenous, Métis, Inuit, Canadian, all nation, to preserve joy? What would be your message for them?
Do you want to start?
Oh, just one. I just have one word. Laugh.
I think I would say, even if the world isn't giving you permission to laugh and experience joy, that you can give yourself that permission and that space. And that you deserve it, that you deserve to laugh loud and love even louder.
Can I just say one quick thing? Tomson, one thing that you've said before is that your favorite music, and I found this fascinating. You say your favorite music is silence.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Oh, I love it. I love the silence. I like. You know what? My father. We didn't have electricity where I grew up. And the battery, the one battery that was in Brochet, did belong to somebody else. So my sister had to go over to this woman's house to listen to the radio. And at one point I had 7 sisters. We come from huge families. Anyway, my father used to sit there on the couch and just look at the ceiling. And I wondered, and he didn't read. There was no television, no radio, nothing. And he used to just sit there in silence for long periods of time. And I used to wonder, what's he doing there? He must be awfully bored. But he wasn't. And all of a sudden, years and years later, I realized when I was doing it myself in Aylmer, that he was listening to the silence. The silence to him was a kind of music. And when you're up that far north, you do almost hear the earth breathe. The wind, and the land sort of goes, the swampy areas go. You've never heard silence that pure. It's a miraculous land. Northern Canada is a miracle. It really is. And we have to keep it that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for giving us joy and laughter, but also a lot to reflect on as we leave this evening and as we continue the conversation in the village and elsewhere. Adrian, thank you very much for moderating or hosting our evening, you had much heart curiosity, you had thoughtfulness, you shared. We saw that you were very interested in what. I'll stop there. I think it's just the heart curiosity.
You're great, Adrian. You're amazing.
And thank you.
He's very good. He's very good. I was so impressed the first time I met him, 4 years ago, pre-pandemic. It was before the pandemic. Yeah, in the church, in the confessional.
And thank you very much, Shea and Tomson, for sharing of yourselves with such candor and humor and humility and great joy. Thank you.
And also, I think on behalf of the entire audience, we'd like to thank Hélène for your leadership and the many volunteers, your fantastic team that put this together and allows us to meet each and every year. We know that there's a lot of work that goes into this, so thank you for your work. Thank you.
And thanks to our community, you make it possible. Thanks very much. There's some books for sale right over there, and Tomson and Shea, if you want to sign some books, it's already a little bit late, but if you want to, please do.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. Thank you
Have
for
a good
listening.
night. Thanks for your attention. Thank you.